All right, so we're all very familiar with how the neoliberal view on immigration treats people like fungible consumer units or economic integers and not the bearers of civilization with various cultural prejudices that people have. So I thought I'd just torture you with how that particular regime is just going to roll on.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Yeah,
Good.
immigration salience has kind of reached a fever pitch, but we're just
Yes.
going to keep pushing until they actually do something about it. That'd be
Yes.
useful for once. So here's the first thing that happened about a week or so ago. The Treasury had told Rishi Sunak, right ahead of him becoming Prime Minister, this is in 2022, that they should boost immigration instead of cutting taxes. Because that's worked wonderfully for bolstering economic growth, hasn't it?
Well, yeah, I'm sure if you put that to a vote nationwide, I'm sure everyone would choose the same thing.
Quite. Not like the Brexit referendum was about specifically lowering migration or anything. This sort of logic doesn't shock me. So when I went to Conservative Party conference, there was a big think tank debate, and it was between the Adam Smith Institute, the Institute for Economic Affairs, who we'll be mentioning momentarily, Policy Exchange, and Centre for Policy Studies. And two of them were for and two of them were against increasing immigration. And the fellow from the Adam Smith Institute turned around and said, well, the Treasury Green Book says we need at least 200,000 net increase of immigration every single year. So we should go by the Treasury orthodoxy. It doesn't matter where they're from. It just matters that we need to battery farm bodies, and they're just as productive as the next one.
I have looked into their methodology, and basically it's shit. It's full of nonsense assumptions that basically, well, like you say, everybody is interchangeable. That somebody fresh off the boat from Cameroon is equally as productive as somebody who was born and raised here, speaks the language, and knows the culture.
Yeah, if only they took a look at the study from the Netherlands that both Callum and I covered about a week or so ago now, where they found out that North Africans, people from Turkey and the Middle East are never net economic contributors for the rest of their lives. But hey-ho. So according to leaked Treasury documents presented to Sunak's senior team in late 2022, civil servants, those wonderful people who are always acting in our interest, said personal tax cuts would have a low impact on boosting economic growth despite coming at a medium fiscal cost. A source close to the Prime Minister said, get a load of this, advisors advise and ministers decide. This advice was wrong, but ministers disregarded it and decided to cut taxes and have been proven right. But we had net record migration since then. You only decided to cut migration when everyone noticed we had net record migration, and you browned your pants thinking this is going to torpedo us in the polls. And even then, you only cut it by a little bit. So, no, ministers decided to flood our country with foreigners, but there you go. So the OBR, which is the Office for Budgetary Responsibility, had warned in November that while the economy was now larger than pre-COVID size, this has been driven by a higher population amid a surge in net migration. GDP per head is still roughly 0.6% below its pre-pandemic peak. So GDP is going up because the number of net people and the number of government spending on net people is going up, but GDP per capita is still down, so we're still poorer.
And it's only 0.6 below because they rigged the numbers for inflation.
Yeah.
So it's actually lower than that. I mean, definitely.
I'm loving being bankrupt. It's great fun, that. So still, have you considered that mass migration is the backbone of the UK economy, despite this?
This is why I don't take any of this seriously, because it's just like, you're lying at this point, or you're actually retarded. I don't know what to do with these people.
Sorry to interrupt the video, but I thought I'd announce that we have a new line of merch. This is our aesthetics collection. So I was thinking that in the face of AI art debasing the very concept of art, actually we'd do something quite positive. So we commissioned a series of paintings that were actually really beautiful and could be something that we could present outside of politics. So for example, we have this magnificent painting of a ship weathering a storm, which I thought was just really nice. And we have, of course, a glorious, sort of surrealist, giant white tiger drinking from a lake. But also there are other things that are just kind of interesting, such as the chap lost in cyberspace, or something that I thought might, in time for Christmas, make a great present for your mum or something like that, a beautiful cat lounging on some clouds. Basically, we wanted to do some stuff that wasn't just political, so things that were just nice and beautiful and interesting, because that's also a part of the world we want to curate. So you can go over to shop.lotuses.com. Buying the merch is a really great way of supporting us and means that we can live past demonetization. And I'm sure they make great gifts for the folks as well.
There is a bit in here that would point towards the latter of this man being not too bright. I mean, so this guy, just for a bit of background, he's the chief foreign affairs columnist for the Financial Times since 2006. And despite being involved in foreign affairs, he endorsed Barack Obama twice and defended the invasion of Syria. And he's also a Remainer. So I wouldn't take his track record of predictions to be all that bright. And he wrote a 2010 book called Zero Sum World. And he said the period of globalization leading up to 2008 was a win-win world. Yes, I'm really glad that we offshored all of our manufacturing capacity and enriched our enemy China and then cut our nose off to spite our face with Russia. But brilliant, great record, Gideon Rachman. But anyway, so he said, he starts off with Enoch Powell's Rivers of Blood speech in this particular one. And he said, perhaps Powell's foreboding is being borne out more than 50 years after his speech, or perhaps not. There are two major flaws in the idea that mass immigration was a mistake now ripping Western society apart. Well, open your curtains once in a while and you'll be able to see that that's the case. But first, the idea that ethnic homogeneity used to guarantee social peace in the West is an obvious nonsense. And he points to the wars between the English and the French, or the fact that the Koreans have been at each other's throats for ages, to say that ethnic homogeneity does not increase peace.
Well, also, there's semi-regular wars between the Indians and Pakistanis every time there's a cricket match on.
Yeah, in Leicester. I'm really glad we've supported that particular conflict.
They're just like not serious. It's just like if you have homogeneity in ethnic categories, therefore you won't have conflict ever. No one's saying that. Like, of course, there's still conflict between, as Korea shows, communists and non-communists. They're just not serious. Just not a serious person, even engaging on any serious terms.
Yes, but I think part of the reason is it's the arrogance that enough suppression of the native culture as to not provoke the new arrivals and enough economic prosperity will make converts of everyone into this sort of like woolly multicultural ideal where no one will ever fight, and it's just a pipe dream. It's just blank slate BS, but it won't stop some of the boomers from buying into it, either disingenuously or sincerely. And the second one, he says, the social and economic costs of severely curtailing immigration would be enormous. Many of the people who now complain about too many immigrants would be outraged by the costs of having too few. Opponents of mass immigration say it imposes heavy economic and social costs, like Matt Goodwin, who says close to half of all social housing in London goes to households headed by someone who is not born in Britain, and that's not sustainable. People seem to toss and turn in their sleep at night being aggravated by Goodwin's point on social housing, because there's another article on that shortly. They just can't fathom that we shouldn't be housing the entire third world at our expense, but whatever. And he says, this is hardly surprising, since 41% of Londoners were born overseas. And if you include people like me, whose parents are born overseas, the number of Londoners with a migration background is far higher. Aha, yes, of course social housing goes to foreigners, because most of your city is foreigners. Checkmate. It's like, that's the problem.
Not a single house should be going to them. They're foreigners.
This is why I'm saying, you're missing the point, either deliberately or because you're thick as concrete, like Mike Graham could have grown you. Could it be that high levels of immigration are actually a large part of the London success story? Prepare for the meme. That's all I'm going to say. Take the migrants out of London and the city would stop functioning. The other day, I had my hair cut by a Syrian barber. Cash only, I'm sure. They then travelled to a doctor's appointment in an Uber driven by a Nigerian. At the hospital, I had a scan carried out by 2 Spaniards before going to see my Delhi-trained specialist. Britain's much-prized NHS would in fact collapse without the contribution of immigrants. Some 35% of doctors working in the NHS are overseas nationals. Now, we've broken down before that actually that's not really the case, that the NHS would collapse without migrants, because it predated migrants and it was running not at a net cost that was bankrupting the country.
Well, it's quite simple. The proportion of foreigners in the NHS is smaller than the proportion of foreigners in the population
that are using the NHS for free.
So if you took out both sides at the same time, God forbid that were to happen, but if you were, then actually the pressure on the NHS would be reduced.
We'll get to how supply and demand doesn't exist shortly, don't worry. But anyway, speaking of supply and demand, let's talk about social housing, because we've already mentioned the spectre of Matt Goodwin, who looms large over these people's minds. Go and watch my interview with him on the website if you fancy getting some background on his take on things. So here's an IEA article. I actually tweeted this article out later on, and the author replied to me, and I said, well, even if we could just build flat pack human battery farm tower blocks ad infinitum, what's our obligation to house the entire third world if it doesn't make our country a better cultural place? We're not negotiating just the pressure on social housing. The point is, why are all these foreigners here in the first place if they're not cultural and economic contributors? And the guy replied, who's going to tell him? Tell me what? I'm not negotiating the infinite housing of foreigners, thank you very much. That's not the point. But anyway, it says it about Goodwin. Goodwin's detractors describe him as a far-right ethnic nationalist, BNP-style rhetoric, etc. Unfortunately, though, none of Goodwin's detractors asked what, to me, is the most obvious question on this matter. Now, what do you think someone's housing policy from the Institute of Economic Affairs, a neoliberal Westminster think tank, is going to be? Any guesses, gentlemen?
everything is fine.
I used to subscribe to the IEA and get all of their books, and I just gave up because. You tell me, what is their view?
Why are we even having this conversation? Why does it matter exactly how social housing is allocated? The reason why it matters, of course, is that demand for social housing vastly outstrips the supply of it. There are many more people who are applying for social housing flats than there are social housing flats. Oh, infinitely build more houses. Why didn't I think of that? Just keep building houses. Never question the demand. Just keep building houses.
Yeah, I mean, Nimitz has sort of got a point, but there is plenty of land that could be used for housing, scrubland and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of agree with some of his points. But what's the point if it's just going to get subsumed by an incoming tide rather than actually solving social problems here?
Well, the house building target, I think, is 300,000 a year. We build 200,000 a year, but net migration is 700,000 a year.
Yes.
Plus, we've got high rates of family breakup, so more people than ever are raising kids across two households. And so you are never going to keep pace with house building if you import a city the size of Birmingham plus to the UK every single year. But noticing that fact is just an issue. And again, why are we obliged to house the entire third world? I mean, Eric Kaufman, again, interviewed on the website, please go watch, very interesting fellow in White Shift, turned around and said, actually, a lot of the time, arguments about logistics for immigration, like the NHS cost or housing cost, they're all well and good to have, but you can actually lose ground if you're just arguing that for the equally important and natural concern of, no, I want ethnic and cultural homogeneity because I want to belong to a country. I want to have high trust neighborhoods. This is what Robert Putnam observed. If you increase diversity, cultural and ethnic in places, the only thing that goes up is TV watching because people are more atomized and stay inside, or protest marches because you have different fractionating fighting interest groups. It turns out that diversity is a weakness or entertainment. It's not a strength. And so arguing in favor of, well, even if we could just spawn houses, like we're playing Zoo Tycoon or something, then why should I want to house the entire third world? Is it going to make my country a more welcoming and at-home feeling place? No.
Well, there is a way to do immigration in a way that had broad support. I mean, if it was people who genuinely had high skills, South Korean electrical engineers and New Zealand oncologists or something.
Swedish women.
And Swedish women with a BMI below 25 or something. Or is that a big nut? I forget now. But anyway, the point is there is a way of doing it that you could get some broad support, but not the way they're doing it, and not when it's 3 times the rate of house building.
Yeah, not as Connie Druckper would tweet out, infinite Africans. No, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, not quite.
Yes.
Not every immigrant is the same. Now, on the social housing thing, the Tories have turned around, and because Matt Goodwin actually leverages pressure on places like GB News, this has been leaked as an exclusive to The Guardian. They're trying to prioritise British homes for British workers. That's going to be the slogan. This is what Downing Street is coming out with.
No, they're not.
Well, no. They're launching a consultation.
Yeah.
So they're going to ask a bunch of their donors and a bunch of public pressure groups. And when all the public pressure groups turn around and say, actually, no, this is racist, they're going to say, well, public didn't want us to do it.
So even Gordon Brown did this. When Gordon Brown was walking up to his massive election defeat in late 2009, he started coming out with this British jobs for big British workers thing. This is just something that British politicians do just before they lose an election.
Well, same thing with Joe Biden adopting Made in America slogans from Donald Trump now that the economy is going in the toilet. And he's looking to win over any other demographic than just single liberal white women because he's going to lose all that lot. But so apparently, according to this article, advisors to the Prime Minister originally wanted to include a bill titled British Homes for British Workers in the King's speech, but instead decided to focus on the reform of the rental and leasehold markets according to the priorities of Michael Gove. Michael Gove, as per usual, sabotaging things in favour of his boomers and donors. So the relative lack of social housing, coupled with record immigration levels, with The Guardian reports that, has left ministers looking for a way to prioritise British people on the waiting list. One option would be to discriminate on the basis of nationality, but such a move is likely to fall afoul of equalities law, the Blair laws that were done on the way out, and the Conservatives still haven't repealed.
Yes.
Thanks very much. A more plausible change would be to bar refugees from gaining access to social housing. But this would be controversial, given that those who have successfully been given refugee status are supposed to be allowed to have full access to social benefits. Why are we giving benefits to foreigners? Why are you getting it all?
Surely there's enough pro-refugee people in this country that they can just go in the spare bedroom.
I'm sure Gary Lineker has many sofas with lots of room for them.
Yes, exactly.
He's absolutely going to uphold his standard to take in.
But if I got into power, the first thing I'd do is I'd run a referendum. Should we have high immigration or not? And when we get the results back in, all the people who ticked yes, just say, okay, we're going to empty out the social housing and put them in your spare bedroom then.
Yeah, quite. There we go. Just hide it in the small print at the bottom.
Well, yeah.
Nobody ever reads. So, but British Homes for British Workers, okay, even though I'm not a big fan of social housing, even though I don't trust the Tories to do it, it seems to be a fair sentiment to at least prioritise when you're making policy the people who have nowhere else to go to that vote you in and you're meant to be governing over with consideration. Well, it turns out also, according to The Guardian, that this is a centuries-old xenophobic slogan by Keenan Malik. British man. That's the yes, quite, yes. This is an interesting start here. Right, let's read. Not a day passes, but English families are ruthlessly turned out to make room for foreign invaders. Quote, they can't get a home for their children. They see black and ethnic minority communities moving in and are angry. And quote, millions of ordinary people up and down Britain are utterly fed up with how immigration is driving up house prices, rents, and flooding social housing. Now, these are 3 quotes across 120 years. The first from Tory MP Stepney, for the Stepney, William Evans Gordon, in a debate in 1902. The second from a newspaper interview in 2006 by New Labour Minister Margaret Hodge. And the third from a Spectator article by Matt Goodwin. Ooh.
I was thinking this was quite based for a Guardian article, but...
And he's whining about it.
I see. Right.
Yes. So, British Homes for British Workers may be an empty slogan, but it's one that Evans Gordon would have understood, implicit in the sentiment that echoes across the century, at the heart of which is a concern for less for working class well-being than for pinning on immigrants the blame for the failures of social policy to improve working class lives. Again, demand has absolutely no stress on supply. Just ignore it. It's just build more houses and give more subsidies to poor white English people who used to have white privilege yesterday, but all of a sudden they're now systemically disadvantaged because it's convenient to the narrative. That's okay, all right, fine, whatever. So we've already agreed that we need infinite Africans here. So we're stuck with that. The Tory party think that's a foregone conclusion. So does the Treasury. So at least we can make them contributors, right? So at least they can contribute to the economy. They can be great bastions to the second empire that we're going to launch, I suppose, at some point. Josh noticed just outside our office we have Migrant Tower. So that's one of the migrant battery farms, and we've noticed a lot of bicycles parked outside there recently. And one of them has a Just Eat bag behind it. Now that's curious because these are all illegal immigrants or asylum seekers who aren't meant to be working. And so Josh just tweeted out. Now the fascinating thing is that Just Eat, the official Twitter account, liked to reply to one of Josh's tweets dunking on Josh, or attempting to dunk on Josh. So the Just Eat Twitter account, Josh has a screenshot of this, by the way, are acknowledging the fact that illegals are working for them. Curious. Now, the reason I bring this up is because Reem, who's a friend of mine, Reem Ibrahim, nice girl, dim on politics, she works for the IEA. And she said, the law should change. There's no reason why those waiting on the asylum backlog should be forced to be reliant on the taxpayer. Let them work. That won't be a draw for illegal trafficking and illegal migration and endless channel migrants coming across at all, will it? That won't be a problem.
I mean, it's such a tertiary effect to what is, a downstream problem. They just shouldn't be let in the first place.
It's almost like they're missing the point.
Yes, quite.
Yeah, do you know who else has missed the point? It turns out the government, because they've been giving channel migrants the right to work in the UK now. Yeah. No.
In care?
In the UK. Actually...
So hang on. So these military-age males who have no regard for our social norms are going to be put into care.
They have no regard for the law, so they're going to take care of your grandma, and trust me, they won't beat her.
Yeah, and they can definitely speak English and will be able to respond to 999 calls when she's injured, and oh, look, she's dead. Well, so did you see the WHO survey of people that work in care homes? And they said that, I think it was 1 in 3 had admitted to abusing a patient.
Yeah. Things can only get better.
I told you I'd make you all miserable, didn't I? So let's go into the details of this.
This is what I mean by like the start of that, where if politicians say anything in the Conservative Party, it's just lies. I'm so bored of having to sit there and take them seriously. Like, you people are just awful. Like, the things you have done are unconscionable as a group. And this is why I think they deserve extermination at the polls.
Quite. And they're looking to get it. So 15,706 asylum seekers. This is about a third of the 51,000 in the claims backlog. But, I mean, the claims backlog's even higher than that. The last I heard of it was about 98,000. So, substantial. They were granted work permits according to a Freedom of Information request the Telegraph has published. And these are in sectors like care, as we've said, construction, and farming. Farming, at a time that we're paying British farmers to retire based on their climate emissions. Great, thanks. You are just being replaced by infinite foreigners.
And also, I've got this sneaking suspicion that won't go away. But part of this whole debate about conscription is basically so that a short while down the line they can say, oh, look, nobody wanted to be conscripted. We're going to put the boat people in the army.
Because that worked really well for the Roman Empire, basically paying a bunch of foreigners to fight.
I found a US senator. I think he was a state senator rather than a federal senator. But he was basically making that argument: we should take the illegal immigrants and put them in the military.
Right. So arm them, give them military training, and then expect them not to.
Well, I mean, to be fair, over the lockdown crimes that the government committed on us, there were a number of policemen who didn't want to enforce it because it was ridiculous. But if you put a foreign person in a uniform, they're probably going to be much more effective at, ordering the population around.
Not being funny, this is why, one, you get Spotify adverts by the Met Police saying, police the community that looks like you. They are racially segregating policing. And two, I have noticed a lot that parking attendants, sort of TfL security wardens, and the ULEZ camera compliance officers are disproportionately new minorities.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I used to live in London for a long time. Yeah. I knew that you had to be very careful where you parked unless Nigeria was playing Cameroon, and then you can park anywhere you like.
Anyway, so a few more details from this. So they've been allowed to work in those occupations, and they're paid 80% of the going pay rate. And apparently, they forego their £49.13 a week subsistence allowance. So they get 50 quid a week on top of having their hotel and that paid for, just for fun, I suppose, just to go to Costa and JD Sports and the like.
But they're not doing this anyway. I mean, as evidence, what you do is just go and get an illegal job with Just Eat, and then you get to keep the money we give you and the revenue you get from Just Eat.
Yeah, because it's usually cash only. Great, glad we're paying for all of this. So just as a pointer, just let them work. Just build more housing. Not only is that not a solution, but also, why should we? Why should they be here if they are not positive contributors to the economy and to the culture? And just
there's that assumption, isn't there? That there's no one here. Like, just give them jobs, just build them houses. Is the kind of thing you'd say if you discovered a new land and were building some kind of colony for the thousands of people turning up. But that's not where we are. We're in one of the most densely populated places on Earth. I think England is close to India in terms of population density because we're just so crammed in.
I mean, not to throw her under the bus too much, but Reem here, she once did tweet out that post-war Britain would have been nothing without the migrants around to rebuild it. So genuinely, there is an opinion that the Windrush ship was like Britain's Mayflower or something. They showed up and settled an undiscovered continent.
You know, how many houses did they rebuild? I mean, precisely. I mean, I hate that so much. Because there's 0.1% of the population. They rebuilt the whole island. I remember David Lammy once saying his family got here in like the 60s. And he said that his family rebuilt Britain. It's been 15 years before you even arrived.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense. Like, just liars. Just
and also, I'm always confused as to why this raw ability to construct and build nations
it's disappeared.
Doesn't apply back home in Africa.
Yeah, quite. Yeah.
Why?
Well, colonialism, I suppose.
Okay, well, why doesn't it apply in Ethiopia that hasn't been never got colonized?
Well, why didn't they colonize us if they're clearly if diversity is such a strength? Yeah. Why weren't they the empire? But that's a racist question, I suppose. Also, for the pleasure of bringing these people over, these great economic benefactors, we're spending £36 million a year just on private boats to pick them up and ferry them back, rather than send them back to Calais or patrolling the sea with the Royal Navy. That would be fantastic. And then, of course, we're about, 6 million a day? So it's X amount of billion a year on hotels at this point. Fun. Great. Right, the reason I'm raising all of this is because this past weekend, so myself, Carl, Andy No, John, our wonderful producer, who's chained to his desk at the moment, giving me the thumbs up, we actually took Eric Zemmour, who was second in the polls, currently third. We took him round Whitechapel in London. So here we go. There's there's our hero shot. Yeah, he is very amusing because he refuses to learn English. And I really like that, actually, as a French politician. And he kept making jibes about, he kept saying to Carl, what was the point of you guys defeating Napoleon and claiming British sovereignty a couple of hundred years ago? Because now you've been colonized in reverse. And the
Well, he's
reason,
right, isn't he?
yeah, well, the reason I'm bringing this up is because look at all these economic benefactors. Look at the street markets that they've got. Look at the area that they have. They've built the East London Mosque. It's one of the largest mosques in Britain. Look at the enrichment they're bringing to the area. I'll tell you what. I was walking around it as a native Londoner, and I remember one of my first sort of political awareness moments as a kid. It was in 2011, the London riots, and I was about 12, right? And they were a couple of roads away from me. They stopped, and I think it was only because the EDL got into a fight with the rioters, and so the police had to come and cordon it off. And so that meant that it didn't come near enough to me up the high street. But I remember being petrified of that as a kid, seeing all those department stores on fire and all the smash and grabs happening. And I walked around Bethnal Green in Whitechapel and just thought, why did they even stop? What was the point? Everywhere smothered in graffiti, everywhere smothered in Palestine flags and stickers about the IDF being baby murderers and things like that. There's cardboard boxes and refuse everywhere. There are stands. I mean, Eric put out a video here. This is Whitechapel Tube Station. Here we go. Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, 3 men, 1 mission. Ah, yes, because Jesus was an Islamic preacher.
I remember the 2008 riots as well. There was one house on my street that the day after the 2008 riots.
2011.
Yeah. Oh, 2011 riots. There was one house on my street that had a empty 50-inch widescreen TV box just dumped on the lawn. And by sheer coincidence, that was the one house in the streets where. Oh, actually, no, I can't remember who lived there now. No, sorry, it's all gone.
Curious. But just look at this. I mean, I was walking around it feeling like a stranger in my homeland, and Carl was remarking to Eric, just look at the way that people were looking at us as. Well, we were, aside from one man that was there, the only white/English/European people of the diaspora. The only other white person there was a very posh English communist who was standing outside the Whitechapel Tube Station, waving the Socialist Worker newspaper and saying "Solidarity, brothers," because of course he was that fifth columnist agitator, accelerating obviously the colonization of his place. But again, okay, even if you let them work. Even if you built battery-farmed homes, you could house them all here. Are they making it a better place? Take a walk around Whitechapel sometime, and you'll see that they're not contributing to the culture because they have cultural prejudices that are apathetic or incompatible or hostile to the British way of life. So you've either deliberately or ignorantly missed the point. But no, I'm not negotiating about bringing infinite Africans and Middle Easterners here. It doesn't make the place better. Stop.
If you appreciated that episode from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as the Brokenomics series, this episode on behavioral economics. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Twitter at lotuseaters_com on Twitter. Thank you and goodbye.